Kayamika woke up that morning with a heart full of excitement. The little town of Obudu was buzzing with news of her engagement dinner, and she wanted everything to be perfect. From the moment the sun rose, she was on her feet, sweeping the compound, arranging fresh flowers, and checking the food pots over and over again. Her laughter filled the air as she worked, because to her, this wasn't just another evening. It was the beginning of the life she had always dreamed of, with Kelechi, the man she thought she would grow old with. Neighbors passed by and called out her name, smiling at her glowing face. "Kayamika, today you look like a true bride," one of the women teased. She only blushed and waved, her heart beating faster with every word. She pictured Kelechi standing beside her, proud and loving as everyone clapped for them. She imagined children running around in the future, a happy home built on trust and love. To her, Kelechi was her blessing, her answered prayer. Inside the house, she laid out her dress carefully, a soft fabric her mother had sewn just for this night. She held it against her body and smiled at her reflection in the mirror, whispering, "This is the happiest day of my life." As she placed the final decorations on the table, her eyes shone with hope. She had no idea that at this very table, where she placed her heart and dreams, a dark plan was waiting to unfold. The evening came alive with laughter, greetings, and the sound of footsteps as friends and relatives entered the compound. The aroma of jollof rice and pepper soup filled the air, and Kayamika felt her chest swell with pride. Everyone was here to celebrate her love. She moved gracefully from table to table, welcoming guests, making sure they had food and drinks. Her heart danced every time she caught a glimpse of Kelechi. Tonight, she thought, was proof that all her waiting had been worth it. But in the middle of the noise, she noticed something strange. Kelechi wasn't by her side as much as she expected. Instead, she saw him step out toward the corner of the compound, his phone pressed tightly to his ear. At first, she thought nothing of it. Maybe he was just making sure a friend had directions or checking on some last-minute detail. But then she caught his tone. It wasn't warm, it wasn't joyful. It was sharp, cold, and secretive. Her smile faded. Curiosity tugged at her, so she slowly walked closer, careful not to be seen. The laughter of her guests covered her footsteps as she inched toward him. And then she heard the words that shattered her world. "Once she drinks it, everything will be mine. Her land, her money, her family's respect." Kayamika's body froze. Her hand clutched the edge of the wall for balance as her knees grew weak. She wanted to believe she heard wrong, but the certainty in his voice made her heart pound in terror. Her fiancé, the man she was ready to give her life to, was plotting against her. Not just to betray her love, but to end her life. Her mind raced, questions crashing into her chest. How could he smile at me while planning this? How many times has he looked at me and thought of nothing but what he could take? Her heart ached, tears welling in her eyes, but she forced herself to stay quiet. One wrong sound and he might know she had heard. Kelechi ended the call with a smug laugh, straightening his shirt before turning back toward the guests. His face returned to that charming mask everyone admired, but to Kayamika, it was now the face of a stranger. She quickly stepped back into the shadows, holding her breath until he passed. Her whole world felt like it had collapsed in that single moment. The table she had decorated with love, the food she had cooked with joy, the dress she had chosen with care, all of it suddenly felt meaningless. She wasn't just a bride-to-be anymore. She was prey sitting at the edge of a trap. As she wiped her tears before anyone could notice, Kayamika forced herself to put on a smile again. Guests still saw her as the glowing bride. Nobody knew the storm raging inside her. But deep down she already understood. Tonight was not just about celebration. Tonight was a fight for her life. The long wooden tables were filled with steaming plates of food, bright lanterns hanging above, and the sound of laughter rolling across the compound. Guests clapped to the beat of a drum as children ran around with sticky fingers from stolen bites of meat. To anyone looking from the outside, it was a perfect engagement dinner. But for Kayamika, sitting beside Kelechi, every sound seemed far away, every smile looked unreal. Her heart thudded so loudly in her chest she feared someone would hear it. Kelechi, with his smooth smile and confident charm, lifted a bottle of palm wine and poured into her glass. His hand was steady, his face calm, but she now knew the truth. That cup was not a symbol of love. It was a weapon. As the liquid rose and settled, her hands trembled under the table. She felt the weight of every eye watching them, expecting her to raise her glass in happiness. He leaned close and whispered, "To us, my love," before sliding the cup gently toward her. His voice was warm, but to her ears it was poison itself. She forced a smile, though her lips quivered, and her fingers curled tightly around the glass. Around them people were eating and laughing. Nobody knew that death sat quietly in her hand. She lifted the cup, her throat dry, her body screaming at her to run. But she couldn't, not yet. If she refused the drink, if she pushed it away, Kelechi would know she had discovered his plan. And if he knew, he might act faster, more violently. She tilted the glass toward her mouth, just enough for the wine to brush her lips. The guests cheered, thinking she had taken a sip, but she let the liquid hover without swallowing. Her heart raced, her palms slick with sweat. Carefully, she lowered the cup back to the table, smiling faintly as though she had enjoyed the taste. Inside, her mind spun like a wheel. How do I escape? How do I live through this night? Every second felt like a knife against her skin. She glanced quickly around the table, her parents laughing with the elders, her cousins busy serving food, the neighbors deep in conversation. Nobody suspected a thing. She was alone in her fear, trapped in plain sight. Kelechi, satisfied, clinked his glass against hers and drank deeply. "A new beginning," he said loudly, his grin wide. The guests cheered again, raising their glasses. Kayamika joined in the smile, but her body was trembling under her dress. She pressed the glass down firmly on the table, as if anchoring her life to it. "Stay calm," she told herself. "Don't let him see your fear. Don't let him win." The laughter around her grew louder, but inside her, a silent battle had begun. She was staring at the very cup meant to end her life, and she knew she had only moments to find a way out. Kayamika's smile was still fixed on her face as she gently pushed back her chair. "Excuse me," she said softly, lifting the glass in her hand. Guests barely noticed. The music and laughter swallowed her voice. But inside, her heart was pounding like a drum. Every step toward the kitchen felt heavy, as if the earth itself was trying to hold her down. She gripped the poisoned glass tightly, terrified of spilling it, terrified of what it meant. The kitchen was quieter, away from the noise of the celebration. Kayamika leaned against the wall, her breath shallow, her hands shaking so hard that the glass clinked against the counter. Her chest rose and fell quickly as tears threatened to spill. This was supposed to be my happiest night, she thought. How did it turn into this nightmare? Just then Ngozi, her cousin, entered with a tray of plates. She stopped in her tracks when she saw Kayamika's pale face and trembling body. "Kayamika, what's wrong? You don't look well," Ngozi said, setting the tray down. Kayamika glanced at the door, making sure no one was near, then grabbed Ngozi's arm. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "Ngozi, Kelechi tried to poison me. This drink, it's not safe." Ngozi's eyes widened, her mouth falling open in shock. "What? Are you sure?" Kayamika nodded quickly, tears brimming in her eyes. "I heard him on the phone. He said once I drink it, everything will be his. My land, my money, even my family's respect. Ngozi, he wants me dead." Her words broke into a sob, her body shaking harder. Ngozi pulled her into a quick embrace, steadying her. "Shoo, don't cry here. You can't let anyone see. If he knows you found out, he might try something worse." Kayamika nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. Her cousin's steady presence gave her a small spark of courage. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I can't drink it, but if I refuse, everyone will ask questions. He'll know I discovered his plan." Ngozi's eyes narrowed with determination. "Then we must be smarter than him. We can't just accuse him, people might not believe us. We need to make him expose himself. We'll find a way to turn his own plan against him." Kayamika looked at her cousin, both scared and hopeful. "You mean, make him drink it?" Ngozi gave a small, firm nod. "Exactly. If he's so sure about this drink, then let him be the one to taste it." The thought sent a shiver through Kayamika, but also a strange strength. For the first time that night, she felt like she wasn't completely helpless. She wasn't just waiting for death anymore. She had a chance to fight back. Ngozi squeezed her hand tightly. Listen to me. Keep smiling. Pretend you know nothing. I'll be right beside you. Together, we'll make sure everyone sees who he truly is. Kayamika took a deep breath, steadying herself. She picked up the poisoned glass again, her fingers still trembling, but this time with a hint of resolve. Tonight was no longer just about surviving. It was about exposing the man who dared to betray her love. Kayamika wiped her face quickly, forcing her tears to disappear before stepping out of the kitchen. With Ngozi's plan in her heart, she straightened her back and wore the same bright smile everyone expected from a glowing bride. No one could know the storm raging inside her. She walked back toward the table, the poisoned cup still in her hand, her legs trembling beneath her long dress. The drums were still playing, guests were still laughing, and Kelechi sat proudly in his seat, shaking hands and thanking people for coming. His face lit up when he saw her return. "My beautiful bride," he said warmly, holding up his own cup. To the crowd, he looked like the perfect fiancé. But to Kayamika, every word, every smile, carried the weight of betrayal. She sat beside him, keeping her eyes lowered so he wouldn't see the fear behind them. Her heart beat so fast she thought it might explode. The poisoned cup sat in her hand like fire, and Kelechi's cup gleamed beside his plate. She knew this was the moment. She failed, everything would be lost. Summoning every ounce of courage, she stood and raised her glass. "To love," she called, her voice steady though her hands shook. The crowd clapped and cheered, raising their cups high. Kelechi, distracted by the applause, stood beside her, lifting his glass with pride. In that brief moment of noise and distraction, Kayamika's trembling hand moved. She set her cup down in front of Kelechi's plate and, with a small sweep, picked up his cup instead. Her movements were so smooth, so ordinary that no one noticed. Even Kelechi, blinded by his own confidence, didn't realize the switch had been made. Ngozi, watching from across the table, caught her cousin's eye and gave the faintest nod of encouragement. Kayamika's stomach turned with nerves, but she forced herself to smile wider. She lifted the safe cup, the one that had been his, and held it high in the air. "May our union bring joy, peace, and blessings to our families," she declared. Everyone clapped louder, some shouting amen. Kelechi laughed and, without hesitation, picked up the poisoned glass now sitting before him. He clinked it gently against hers. "To forever," he said proudly, looking into her eyes as though he truly meant it. Kayamika's throat tightened, her palms damp with sweat. She pressed the rim of the safe glass to her lips, pretending to drink, while her eyes flicked toward Kelechi. He raised his cup higher and took a long, deep swallow. For a split second the world seemed to stop. The music, the laughter, the clinking of plates, all of it faded. Kayamika's chest ached as she waited, her mind screaming, did it work? Did anyone notice? The tension wrapped around her like a rope, pulling tighter with every heartbeat. If anyone had seen the swap, if Kelechi had realized, she knew chaos would erupt immediately. But as he set his empty glass down with a satisfied grin, completely unaware, she forced herself to keep smiling. Inside, her fear mixed with a dangerous hope. The trick had worked, but the night was far from over. One wrong move could still destroy her. Kelechi rose to his feet, holding the glass high above his head. His smile stretched wide as all eyes turned toward him. "Tonight," he announced, his voice strong and full of pride, "we celebrate true love and loyalty. Kayamika has given me her heart, and I will honor her forever." The crowd cheered, clapping their hands, their voices echoing in joy. To everyone else, his words sounded sweet and noble, but to Kayamika they burned like fire. She knew the truth hidden behind that smile, the darkness sitting inside that cup. He turned toward her, his eyes gleaming with false affection. "To my beautiful bride," he said, then raised the glass to his lips. Kayamika's chest tightened as she watched. Her fingers dug into her dress under the table, praying silently for courage. He tilted the cup and drank deeply, swallowing every drop with confidence, convinced he was in control of everything. First, nothing happened. He placed the empty glass down and grinned, spreading his arms as the crowd clapped louder. Kayamika forced herself to smile too, but her heart hammered in her chest, each beat loud in her ears. She could barely breathe as seconds stretched into what felt like hours. Then, slowly, the smile on Kelechi's face began to falter. His laughter broke into a cough. His hand went to his chest, his confident stance wavering. "Excuse me," he muttered, trying to laugh it off, but his voice shook. Gasps rippled through the crowd as they noticed him stumble. His eyes darted around, his proud mask slipping away. Sweat broke across his forehead, and his knees weakened beneath him. Plates clattered as guests jumped from their seats, rushing to his side. "Are you all right?" someone shouted. "Bring water," another called. The once joyous atmosphere turned into chaos, voices rising in fear and confusion. Kayamika sat frozen, her lips pressed together, her pulse racing faster than ever. She said nothing, only watched as the man who had planned her death struggled in front of everyone. Inside, her emotions twisted, fear, relief, heartbreak, and strength all fighting at once. Kelechi's eyes flickered toward her, wide with shock, almost as if he realized what had happened. But she held his gaze silently, her face calm though her heart thundered. Around them, the night of celebration had turned into a night of revelation. The mask was breaking, and the truth was about to come out. The crowd was in chaos. Plates fell, chairs scraped, and voices clashed as everyone rushed toward Kelechi. He clutched his chest, gasping for air, sweat dripping down his face. His proud smile was gone, replaced by panic. Wait, it's not what you think," he croaked, his voice shaky as he staggered. He tried to straighten his back, tried to hold on to his charm, but his body was betraying him. "Help me," he cried, his eyes darting wildly from face to face. I just need water. I'm fine. Please listen." His words stumbled out desperately, but they only drew more suspicion. The same people who had cheered his toast now looked at him with wide eyes, whispering in confusion. Kayamika stayed seated, her hands trembling in her lap. She felt her mother's hand brush her shoulder, but she couldn't move. All her life she had known Kelechi as kind, respectful, and ambitious, or at least that was the mask he wore. Now, in front of everyone, the mask was cracking. Kelechi's knees buckled, and he fell against the table, knocking over a tray of food. "Kayamika," he called, his voice breaking. "You have to believe me. I would never hurt you. This is just..." He coughed hard, his words choking in his throat. Before he could continue, Ngozi stepped forward. Her voice was sharp, clear, and louder than the noise around them. "Stop lying, Kelechi. We all know the truth now." The room fell quiet, eyes shifting from the struggling man to her. She pointed at him, her face burning with anger. "Kayamika overheard you. You told your friend on the phone that once she drank the poison, everything would be yours. Her land, her money, her family's respect. You planned this night to kill her." Gasps filled the room. Women covered their mouths. Men shook their heads in disbelief. "Poison," someone whispered. "He wanted to kill her," another cried. Kelechi's eyes widened in horror. No, she's lying," he shouted, but his voice was weak, his body trembling. "Kayamika, tell them. You know me, I love you. I would never." But no one believed him anymore. Neighbors whispered to each other, shaking their heads. Relatives who once praised him now pulled their children closer, as if his evil could spread. Even his own family sat frozen, shame written on their faces. Kayamika's father stood slowly, his face dark with anger. "All this time," he said, his voice heavy, "you smiled at us, ate at our table, called us family, and behind it all, you were planning to bury my daughter for land and money." His words cut through the air like a knife. Kelechi tried to speak, but only a strangled sound left his lips. His legs gave way, and he sank to the ground, surrounded not by love, but by whispers of betrayal. Kayamika, her hands still trembling, finally stood. She looked at him one last time, her heart breaking but steady. The man she once trusted with her life had shown his true face, and now the whole town had seen it too. The celebration that had started with music and joy was now a storm of confusion and shame. Plates lay scattered on the ground, food spilled across the tables, and the once cheerful drumbeats had stopped. All eyes were fixed on Kelechi as he writhed on the floor, clutching his chest, his proud face twisted with pain. The same people who had cheered for him minutes ago now pulled back in disgust, whispering behind their hands. "Can you believe it?" one woman gasped. "He wanted to poison her. All for land and money." Another man shook his head, his voice filled with anger. "How can a heart be so wicked?" Pointing fingers rose from every corner of the compound. Children clung to their mothers, peeking at the man who had once been praised as the perfect groom. The whispers grew louder, spreading like fire through dry grass. Each word carried shame, each glance cut deeper than any knife. Kelechi tried to lift his head, his lips moving desperately. "Please, please, it's not true," he begged, but no one wanted to hear his voice anymore. His lies were empty now, his mask completely broken. Even his own brothers and sisters, seated near the front, lowered their eyes and bowed their heads, unable to defend him. His mother covered her face with her wrapper, weeping softly, not for his pain but for the disgrace he had brought on their family. At that moment, Kayamika's parents pushed through the crowd. Her mother, trembling with emotion, wrapped her arms around her daughter. "My child," she whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I almost lost you tonight. God saved you." Her father, a man known for his stern silence, pulled Kayamika close on the other side, his hand resting firmly on her shoulder. His voice cracked as he said, "Forgive us for ever doubting you. You are our treasure, and we nearly let him take you from us." Kayamika broke down, burying her face into her mother's chest. Her body shook with sobs, not just of fear but of relief. For the first time that night, she no longer felt alone. The warmth of her family's embrace gave her strength she thought she had lost. All around them, the whispers continued. Some guests shook their heads in disbelief, others pointed openly at Kelechi, who now lay curled on the ground, humiliated before everyone. His once perfect image had shattered into pieces. The proud man who had spoken of love and loyalty now faced the bitter taste of his own wickedness. Ngozi stood nearby, watching with fierce eyes. "This is justice," she muttered under her breath, making sure her cousins saw the strength they had fought for together. As the night air grew heavier, one thing was clear. The engagement was no longer about celebration. It had become a warning, a story that would spread through Obudu for years to come. The girl they almost buried in silence had risen, and the man who tried to destroy her would never escape the shame of this night. The night that had begun with joy now ended with flashing lights and the sound of sirens. The authorities arrived quickly after word spread of what happened. Guests stepped aside as uniformed men pushed through the crowd, their faces stern. Kelechi lay on the ground, still weak but alive, his once proud figure now pitiful. He tried to speak, to explain, but no one wanted to hear him anymore. His words were drowned by the heavy clink of handcuffs snapping shut around his wrists. Gasps filled the air as the officers lifted him from the ground. The same man who had walked into the compound earlier as a respected fiancé was now being dragged away in shame. His head hung low, his feet stumbling as the crowd whispered angrily. "This is the man who wanted to kill his own bride," one neighbor hissed. "Greed has eaten his heart," another muttered. The whispers carried across Obudu like the evening wind. By the next morning, every corner of the town would know what had happened at Kayamika's engagement dinner. His name, once spoken with admiration, would now be remembered only with disgust and betrayal. Even his own family avoided his eyes as he was taken away, their shame too heavy to bear. Kayamika stood quietly, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her body was still trembling, but her eyes were steady. She watched as Kelechi disappeared into the night, not with anger, but with a deep, aching sadness. This was the man she had once trusted with her dreams, the man she thought would build a future with her. But beneath that mask of love had been a heart filled with greed and deceit. Her mother held her close, whispering, "You are safe now." Her father stood tall beside her, his hand firm on her shoulder, as if reminding her that she would never face such battles alone again. Ngozi, her cousin, gave her a proud smile from across the room. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Kayamika lifted her chin and breathed deeply. She felt the pain of betrayal in every corner of her heart, but beneath it, something stronger was rising. Strength, courage, a fire that she didn't know she had. "I will never be silent again," she whispered to herself, her voice low but steady. She thought of the countless women whose stories were buried because no one believed them, because their voices were silenced by fear. She refused to be one of them. From that night forward, Kayamika promised herself she would live differently. She had escaped death, she had faced betrayal, but she had also discovered her own power. And she would use it, not just for herself, but for every woman who needed to be reminded that her life, her voice, and her worth could never be taken by lies. Obudu would remember Kalechi as a man of shame, but Kayamika would rise from this night as a woman of strength. Months passed, and the memory of that night in Obudu never faded. But instead of letting it break her, Kayamika chose to rise from it. She poured her energy into something greater, opening a women's support center in the heart of town. It was a place where women could come to share their stories, find protection, and build their strength. Every wall of that small center carried hope, painted with bright colors that reminded people of new beginnings. Neighbors who once only knew her as a bride-to-be now admired her as a leader. They whispered as she walked by, not with pity, but with respect. "That is the girl who survived poison," they said softly, and turned her pain into power. Women came to her for guidance, and young girls looked at her as a role model. She had become living proof that betrayal could not silence a determined heart. One sunny afternoon, Kayamika walked through the bustling marketplace. The air was filled with the smell of roasted corn and the sound of traders calling out their goods. Heads turned as she passed, her steps steady, her chin high. People greeted her warmly, some nodding in admiration, others smiling proudly at the courage she carried so gracefully. Behind her, Kalechi's name lingered only in whispers of disgrace. His story was told as a warning, a lesson of greed and betrayal. But Kayamika's name was spoken as a song of strength, a reminder that even the darkest night could give birth to the brightest dawn. With each step, she walked not as a victim, but as a survivor, stronger, braver, and unshaken. Obudu had seen her almost fall, but now it watched her rise.